그러면은 이제 보이시죠?
Hello,
Hi,
colleague.
Clara.
How are
Hi. So nice to meet you and see you.
you? Okay, good.
Yeah. I believe I can share my computer screen. Let's see, screens. Is Agnes there or?
Agnes is nothing. He's
Okay.
she's
So
working.
I share. Let me see here. I share desktop.
Yeah, I
Is that
help you.
correct? And then Keynote. Um, I open the Keynote here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll go like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I want to make sure that this works.
Wow.
I'm gonna go, I think I just, oh yeah, that. And then, okay, and then
Good job.
do I start sharing from the beginning, or when you invite me, I'll start sharing?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then can you let's see here. Ooh, too loud. So sorry. Can you hear that music?
No, we can't.
You don't? Okay. So I was wondering, is it okay? I'll stop sharing. This is my first time sharing screen, so let's see. Stop sharing. Okay. When I'm done with that, is it okay if I do a little exercise? Just some breathing with the kids?
Good. Good job.
That's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
How many I'm
Uh,
very excited.
yeah. Yeah. Good. Good idea. Okay. 오늘은 몇 명 정도 들어볼까요? 뭐,
How
uh,
many kids have been attending?
Around 30, 35.
Okay. And so how will the hour go? Are you going to talk for a bit, or will I start right away? You'll
You can
introduce
start
me?
right away. They'll
Okay.
be joining in around 6:05. So around 6:05, I think you could start.
Okay, 6:05. Just introduce myself and begin.
Yeah.
I'm more nervous for kids than adults. And then I should continue till like
7.
6. I'll go all the way.
Yeah, 6:55, 7.
Okay. And then I can ask questions throughout, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And then when we get toward the end, I'll say that I'm gonna wrap up or I'm all done, and then you'll take over.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How much longer does the meeting go after 7?
Uh, I mean, the Zoom link, it goes more than an hour, but
Okay.
usually speaker ended around 7:05.
And then I will log off.
Yeah, you could log off. You could
I'll say
say
goodbye.
bye.
Okay.
Students will log off, and you also could log off too.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'll come back at 6 o'clock. Okay.
시작하시라고 하고 온 타임이 됐으니까. Hello, Colin, are you there? Okay. Hello, everyone. Today we have a special guest on our webinar. Colin is a docent of the Independence Patriots. Please welcome him. Okay. Thank you. Have a fun time.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Yeah, my name is Colin Kim. I live here in West Hollywood, California. I can see all your faces coming on. It's so nice to see you. I'll just give it a couple seconds for a couple more people to log on. Here comes everybody now. Well, I can't wait to share with you guys this evening. I'm going to give it just maybe 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. Here come all the cameras. This is a good looking bunch. All right, cool. We're going to do a little bit of this a little bit later on. You know, I teach yoga. Can I get a thumbs up? You can hear me okay? Everybody's okay? Okay, cool. I lived in LA my whole life. I was born at the Kaiser, which is on Serrano, just at Sunset Junction here. If you're probably familiar with Los Angeles. I'm 4th generation Korean. My great grandparents were original Korean pioneers. They came on the boats in 1903. I put together a little presentation for you, which I hope will be enjoyable and maybe even exciting, a little bit fun. Let's just get into our bodies a little bit. I teach yoga and fitness, and I always find if we take a couple deep breaths and stretch, everybody just kind of relaxes a little bit, and that'll help me relax too. Okay, let's round the shoulders back. Good. Take a couple deep breaths. Yeah. And then let's inhale through the nose until the lungs stop. Good, and exhale, open mouth. And I'm just going to hit the ground running. So I'm going to share this. Boom. Wow. There we go. Okay. So my great grandfather was Lee on my grandmother's side, and my great grandfather on my grandfather's side was Kim. Jason Lee was my grandmother's father. He was a famous criminal. He owned casinos all over the world, including in Illinois and Wyoming, Alaska, Arkansas, Hawaii, and even in Japan. He's a very powerful person. He did not drink alcohol, but he smoked cigarettes 24 hours a day. His favorite cigarettes were Camel Golds. He swore off drinking so that he could function and focus on his business. He was married to his wife. This is my great grandmother on my grandmother's side, Marie Lee. And this is some of their very first photographs of when they were in Dinuba, California. You probably have heard, because I'm toward the tail end of your 3 weeks in sharing, but 59 steamer boats. So I'm going to have pictures of those boats coming up in a few moments. Were set at the bottom of the Korean Peninsula for any Koreans that could make it onto those boats to come to America. And they had to work 10 years of slavery in exchange for their citizenship. So they had work slavery visas. That was really unique because in the 1800s, slavery had ended, African-American slavery predominantly as we know it, which was an awful period of time. And America was looking to move forward past the stigma of that type of slavery. So what's unique to Koreans is that Koreans came as work immigrants, even though they had to work as slaves. They were, unlike other slaves or work immigrants, allowed to form civic unions and to act as though they were Americans. So my great-grandfather, Jason Lee, the king of the Korean mob empire, he came to Hawaii, and he then married Marie Lee. And this is a picture of them in the fields of Dinuba, California, where Koreans were typically doing citrus for the United States, or Koreans in Hawaii and Virginia were also doing sugarcane for all the cereal and bread and sugar that we eat. This is my great-grandfather's family. He had Marie Lee is on the right, and then you can see his eldest daughter, Winifred. There's two twins there. That's my grandmother's sisters, Lila and Anna. And then my grandmother is third from the left. Great-great-grandmother, Jason Lee's mother, is just in the middle there. Jason Lee, his son, that's my great uncle. That was my dad's uncle, my grandma's brother. And this is here, them in Los Angeles, California. What's unique is notice how nice they're dressed. So he was making all this money on casinos illegally around the world. And he was taking that money, even though he had character flaws. There's actually been many series made about him in Korea because they called him Robin Hood. They called him King of the Underworld because he was taking all of that money to give our family a chance at the American life. I see the chat's going. If there's any technical issues, if somebody could unmute and let me know, that will be great. It'll be easier for me checking the chats as I'm screen sharing. Okay, and feel free to break in anytime if anything's weird. These are some of his casino chips. He had known casinos in Arizona, Arkansas, Illinois, Oregon, Wyoming, and Japan. It's incredible because Japan, Russia, and China colonized Korea, Japan predominantly for 400 years. That was the impetus of the Korean War. So imagine the type of power that he had so early on in the 30s and 40s during and through the occupation of Japan to be able to have the favor of the Japanese government to be running these casinos. They know these are only the casinos we know that were in existence because there are marked letters of shipping receipts where he was shipping gambling equipment that was made in the United States. And he was shipping that gambling equipment around the world. These were some of his chips that he would use in his casinos. You can see the JL. He famously ran a casino in Chicago. This is 1358 North Clark Street. And this was a 3-decker sandwich shop owned by a Japanese married couple. And while it did make actual sandwiches, upstairs and downstairs in the basement were casinos where people could gamble. And his casinos really catered to people in the military. And it should be noted too, the government knew that all of this was happening. So governments typically know what's going on. It was allowed to happen because there's little payoffs that happen even in legal government with illegal criminal behavior. So everybody was patting each other on the back. Al Capone is one of the most famous mobsters in the world. There's been many movies about him. He famously disappeared, and for years and years, it's still today an unsolved case as to where the body of Al Capone is. Al Capone allowed my grandfather to operate, my great-grandfather, Jason Lee, to operate in Chicago. And until he became too big. When Jason Lee became too big, he kicked Jason Lee out of Chicago. This is the current location of 1358 North Clark Street in Chicago. This is where the sandwich shop, this is north facing on the road. I just took this from Google, so these are relatively fresh. And then you'll see that this is south facing, just across the street. Okay. Now, there's kind of a punchline that I'm leading up to with a little bit of suspense. Let's see here, because I can see everybody. In 1956, and it was actually earlier that year in 1955, my grandfather, great-grandfather, Jason Lee, and two men from Los Angeles went to Monte Carlo, France. It's a very famous rich banking center, and it's where rich people go to spend their money and flaunt their wealth. They went to the biggest casino in Monte Carlo to play craps. This is an article from the Saturday Evening Post. This was a very, very famous magazine. So this is kind of like the Us Weekly that you would see. It would come out Saturday nights. There was no TV or internet at that time. So the American citizens could not wait to get their hands on the most hot topic issues of the time with the Saturday Evening Post. You'll notice the artwork here. Norman Rockwell is a very famous painter. You might have heard of him. You can ask your parents or grandparents about him. He painted some of the most famous nostalgic American paintings of all time, like what you'll see here. And then famously, Santa Claus, which was originally produced by Coca-Cola. So Saint Nick had a famous story of being kind to civilians and catering to the community. That was the original legacy of Saint Nick. In 1919, Coca-Cola took the image of Saint Nick, which was just a frail person that kind of looked like a Catholic saint, and they made it more the jolly Santa Claus. That was in 1919. It was probably around the early 1950s that Norman Rockwell painted the original image of this new type of Santa Claus, and that's the jolly Santa Claus that we all recognize in our lives and still believe in to this day. Okay, so November 26th, 1956. Here is an article. This is great-grandfather Lee with one of the gentlemen you can see. They were arrested. And the two mugshots. They language still to this day, and you might even have encountered this in your own life, and we're so thankful for civil liberties and social graces coming forth. But even in the article, it says a spectacled Oriental named Jason Lee with a flat brown face and suspicious slit eyes. I know growing up in Anaheim, California, I grew up near Disneyland. I went to an almost all-white Lutheran school, and me and my brother were always asked if we played piano and violin because we were the only half Korean people. So while we've integrated rather quickly, I can relate to you on any type of name calling or throwing that's ever been thrown your way. And we're stronger because of it. And it was no different back then, and actually kind of worse. So jumping forward here, this is a huge jump because I only have a certain amount of time with you and I want to get it all in. Grace Kelly, she was one of the most famous performers of all time. This is Marilyn Monroe before Marilyn Monroe. She did some of the most famous dancing sequences with Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly. And you might be wondering why I've brought her into the picture. While all this is happening in Monte Carlo, here's images of the Monte Carlo casino. And also, these are the dice of how they stole money from the craps table in Monte Carlo. These dice were misprinted. So there was, on a six-sided dice, most of the sides would say 6 or 6. So they get snake eyes more often. There were missing numbers, and they also shaved weight off of the dice so they would always land. I believe they took to Monte Carlo in 1955 about 120 different pairs of loaded and fake dice. While they were playing in the casino, they were busted because they were winning so much money so quickly. And they basically won about $1 million in a single evening, in equivalent to inflation for the 50s. They were very suspicious. They didn't have the technology to understand what was happening or why the casino was being robbed. So they just kicked them out of the casino. They had no way of coming to understand all of this until the investigation took place. So while all that's happening, he gets taken to a catacomb underneath the streets of Monte Carlo. And Grace Kelly was marrying Prince Rainier. Prince Rainier is one of the most famous families on earth. It's like the Kennedys, the Roosevelts, the Rockefellers. And he was the son that came into basically the ownership of Monte Carlo. It wasn't just property, it was like actually ownership of the city. And he also came into ownership of the casino. So because Grace Kelly and Prince Rainier were getting married, very much like Princess Diana and like what we recognize in the adoration of the prince and princess of the UK and England, like Prince Charles and Princess Diana of the 1980s, and God rest her soul, in the 1990s. This was a huge time because it was the end of World War II and the end of the Korean War. And the whole world wanted a romantic moment to be over the pain of the war. So many people dying, millions and millions of people had died. I'm trusting that I'm doing okay. I can only see 4 panes on my screen of faces. And if anybody needs to jump in at any time, you're always welcome to do that. So Prince Rainier, to keep the focus on the romantic, nostalgic wedding to heal the experience of World War II, let Jason Lee and the 2 criminals off the hook. He said they were not going to press charges, but that a firstborn son would have to come to Monte Carlo to pick him up. I have a photo coming in about 2 or 3 slides, which is my great uncle Jason Lee at 16 years old. He had to go on one of those very tiny steamer boats across the Atlantic Ocean to retrieve his father. This is my grandmother, Winifred Kim, Jason Lee's daughter. There's the 2 twins, Anna and Lila, my grandma, Winnie. This is her and Catalina. I don't mean for any of this to sound like coming off like a brag, because I mean this from the bottom of my heart. But at this time, everybody was wondering why like Chinks or Slant Eyes or Orientals are having access to this type of clothing and to go to Catalina and sit under hotels. And how do they even have a camera to take pictures? They had cars. They were being limousined around Los Angeles. And this all happened because of the money funding from the criminal enterprise of my great-grandfather, Jason Lee. This is Jason Lee Jr. At 16 years old, this gentleman is the person who went to Korea to extract his father. Okay, my great-grandmother, hold on, I'm gonna take a little break here. Let's see. Just wanna see everybody. I can't see all the panes when I'm sharing. Can I get a thumbs up? How am I doing? Am I doing okay? Okay, I'm gonna keep on going. I'm working to keep your interest the best I can. Here we go. Boom. Okay, go here. Here. Okay. How do I escape this? One moment, please. This is that. This is like, okay. So Winifred Kim married Yin Kim. Now this is all going to connect to Ahn Chung-ho, who you know was the leader of the Korean Democratic Party based in Korea. Sorry, one moment. What I'm doing. Standard. Oh, wow. Okay, so Grandma Winnie married Yin Kim. Yin Kim is the son of original Korean pioneers who came on boats, the 59 steamer boats. He married Winifred here at the Methodist Church on Wilshire Boulevard. And so basically what I'm saying and indicating here is the daughter of the mob married the son of the Democratic Party. So that's very interesting. Grandpa Yin was the son of great-grandmother and great-grandfather Haiwan Kim and Kim Sung-kwan. And he was the playboy of the Democratic Party, kind of like John F. Kennedy Jr. And he said that my grandfather was a funny man. He said he selected Grandma Winnie because she was the most funny and the prettiest. So they got married. And here's a couple photos of them. And again, you have to remember this is at a time in Los Angeles when people were marveling. All Asians at that time were called Japs. And my father remembers being called a Jap in his youth and explaining that he didn't know what that meant. He came home and asked my grandma, he's like, what's a Jap? It's like, they said that it's a Japanese person, but we're Korean. So they're having these elite experiences, going out to dinner, seeing shows in Los Angeles. And people were very unhappy with that, actually. Racism was alive and well. This is my grandmother's family. My dad is the bottom, sitting on the floor, Melvin. My Auntie Wendy, Robert, and my oldest uncle, Uncle Steve. Now, Grandpa Yin, he went to USC and he graduated the School of Dentistry. One of the things that he did, and this is of incredible importance because he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. He graduated USC. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge. There was a period in time where they were walking on foot. I remember my grandfather talking to me and letting me know that one day America was about to bomb Berlin, and they pamphleted all over Berlin and surrounding areas with these little tiny post-it notes that say, tomorrow we're going to bomb everything. And my great-grandfather, Grandpa Yin, said that, I'm sorry, my grandfather, Grandpa Yin, my dad's dad. I was like, well, what did you do? Because you guys were in harm's way. He said, well, as soldiers, we were only in our late teens and early 20s. He said, we went upstairs to a certain house and a family had left so quickly that there was still soup with fire underneath it on the fire. And the American soldiers sat down and they actually, he said it was the first time they had hot food in like over 6 months. The Battle of the Bulge was one of the most notable wars of World War II. This was the turning point in the war. There's been many movies made about this. It was called The Bulge because you can see that bulge pushing out to the left. And this was one of Hitler's last attempts to try and overtake most of Europe. If this war wasn't won successfully by the United States, the world would be a different place now. And we were obviously fighting Nazism. My grandfather, before he died, he gave me his old war book. And I can show you. These are original armbands, one from a body of a Nazi soldier and another one from a nurse at the Red Cross. And there was also, let's see here. There's different pieces of propaganda in here. It's kind of hard to look at for what it represents, but that was the reality of the time. Grandpa Yin, USC graduate, he said that all the medics were killed in the Battle of the Bulge in his unit. And he was the only person that had any type of medical training, but his medical training was only around dentistry. And because he was the most educated with regard to medicine at that particular time, he said that when people were being killed, he would literally stick his fingers in arteries and was doing things that he was never taught to do. But everybody was so terrified and in pain that they leaned into him to do things that I can only imagine. I'm sharing this with you because when my grandfather came back from World War II, he and my grandma Winnie, with assistance with the criminal money from my great-grandfather Jason Lee, they bought their first house. And the family, a husband and wife that sold them the house, was happy to sell them that house. But when they showed them the pink slip, the document, the title of the home, as fancy as a mortgage on a house can sound, it's very simple. It's just a piece of paper. And the new owner comes in to have that piece of paper. When the lawyer was looking over the paperwork for the transfer of the sale of the house, it said in the margins that no Asian people or Mexican people could live in the house. And my grandfather, Grandpa Yin, was of particular note in Los Angeles. So the husband and wife that sold him the house paid no attention to that clause. But when Grandpa Yin came to know that that clause existed, it disturbed him so much that even as they took possession of the house, he wanted to correct that. My grandfather was the top of the Masons and the lodge here on Wilshire Boulevard. It's a very famous secret society of typically only men. He was at the top level of the Masons, and outside of the house, 24 hours before the house transferred title to my grandmother and my grandfather, this house was on Victoria Avenue, just by the 10 freeway at Crenshaw. They laid in the basement with shotguns while the escrow closed because people were protesting outside saying they didn't want Asian people or Chinks living in the area, which is now South Central Los Angeles, USC. They did take possession of the house and continued with threats of burning down the house and everything that you can imagine. Having learned that disturbing information, my Grandpa Yin, he went to the California Supreme Court and filed a case. And they call a binding agreement a covenant. And while this may be a little bit boring, it says, however, this decision does not preclude a later holding that racial restrictive covenants are void because opposed to express public policy of the United States as set forth in the Civil Rights Act and in the Charter of the United Nations. The courts have thus far, to that point, they have totally ignored pursuing litigation. These cases on the 14th Amendment apply to all minority groups, although the cases have usually arisen in suits by Negroes, African Americans. And you can see Yin Kim versus Superior Court, California 334 US 813. So African American people have been struggling for years, decades, to break through the covenant of I could sell you a house and I could write in the margin that nobody under 5'11" can ever live in this house. And that would apply to you and even forward in perpetuity for the rest of time if you agreed to accept that contract. And that's the way contracts were in Los Angeles. So Los Angeles was full of white people pushing everybody out. It was these cases. It wasn't only Yin Kim, but it was Yin Kim, Kentucky versus Powers, and Amur versus Superior Court of California. Those three cases are what tipped the scale for everything. And it was because my Grandpa Yin went to the California Supreme Court dressed in his army fatigues and said, I'm a graduate of USC. I have a dentistry degree. I'm serving people. Why is this wrong? And they fixed that. With great-grandfather Jason Lee's money, this is his father-in-law, he opened the first dental office, which was located in a strip mall. USC bought that land, but it's currently where the USC pharmacy stands to modern day. And he opened the very first medical office catering to all types of Asian people. Just like HIV with gay people, people thought in the 1980s that if you touch a person, you could get HIV. And we know that that's not the case. And similarly, when Asians were influxing into the United States, people thought that if you touched an Asian person, that you could get tuberculosis or TB or what they call yellow fever, which is a very painful, deadly disease. And so nobody, including insurance companies, no medicine came to any type of Asian persons, not just Koreans, in the United States. And so what Grandpa Yin did is he opened the first medical office catering to, he had a gym. His license was in dentistry, but the original shop had dentistry. He had 3 chairs, a gym, and also medical care for things like prenatal and helping women through navigate childbirth. He was the first person for Asians. You can imagine what it would be like to have your tooth drilled in an old-fashioned way. The picture you see on the left is a pneumatic drill with an air compressor and a belt. And the person would have to endure all of that noise like a construction site to get their teeth drilled. And he was the first Asian person to use new equipment, hydraulic water. So very, very cool. Moving forward. This is just off to the side. My grandmother's cousin is Alfred Hoyen Song. He was the first Korean to graduate San Francisco College. He was also the first Korean senator. He authored over 200 equal housing bills. This is separate from Grandpa Yin, although they knew one another and hung out socially. He authored over 200 equal housing bills on his own. So the fact that we can buy a house as Asians is largely in part to things that Alfred Hoyen Song did. He's also famously the namesake of the Beverly Song Act, which is called the Lemon Law. So if you buy a car and that car does not work for the first 6 months, you can return that car free of charge and also be paid for any losses. And the Lemon Law was written by Alfred Hoyen Song and his partner, last name Beverly. The Wilshire Western Metro Station, also known as the Purple Line entrance. This is across from the Wiltern Theater on Wilshire and Western. This was a commemoration that happened about 15 years ago now. And it is named after him. You can see that monument out front with his face, the Alfred Hoyen Wilshire Western Metro Station. Grandpa Yin's, maybe I did this a little bit out of order. I'm just going to be toward the end here. I'm catching up in real time. I'm going to bring it right up to my parents in Los Angeles. Kim Sung Kwan and Haiwan Sarah Kim. This is my grandfather's side, his parents. They came here in 1903 on the original 59 steamboats. Those steamboats were placed at the bottom of the Korean Peninsula. America pamphleted the Korean Peninsula and said any Korean that could make it to get on those boats would be taken as a work immigrant, and they were lucky enough to get on those boats. And this is their 3 children, Earl, Nark, and my grandfather Yin on the right. It's such an honor to be speaking to you today, and feel a little bit emotional looking at this photo. Things have changed so much, and then in certain ways not at all. So I'm sure you've been widely made aware of An Chung-ho, our Korean democratic leader who had the ethics that we abide by and understand to be humane and work with integrity and dignity and civility. I love that the ideals of An Chung-ho are to be honest, to be civil, and he was in hiding. It was a very dangerous time because the rest of the world potentially wanted to kill a democratic leader to prevent Koreans from having their land. I thought it was so fascinating, being Korean, that the Korean War had nothing to do with Koreans, even though Koreans were there. It was Japan, China, and Russia fighting over Korea. So any type of jokes I heard as a kid growing up about the Korean War, Koreans were bad, I was shocked to find out as an adult that Koreans are the most gentle people, unlike other cultures. And An Chung-ho worked hard to keep that alive. Koreans, there's displaced refugees. You see people like in Palestine or in Syria. So imagine after the heartache of colonization and genocide, if people around the world had the strength for nearly 70 years to keep themselves strong on the off chance that if the land of their country ever came back, they could immediately take it back. And An Chung-ho, as you know, was the person who guided us through that. And in that original dispersion, there were 13 sects or colonies of Korean people that were dropped off around the world. I did a heritage trip through the Veterans Affairs section of the Korean government. They took us on a trip to the museums to experience what great-grandparents had done. And it was found out that they were the chapter organizers of the Los Angeles chapter. Because this was a communal event, there were many people from all different countries, and it was so interesting to see Koreans that were dropped off in Russia who had fair skin and white hair, but spoke only Russian. They actually looked like Santa Claus. These are what some of those boats look like. And it was a boat similar to this that Uncle Jay had to go retrieve Jason Lee. So about 5,000 people, imagine that, got on 59 boats, similar to this one and the one that you see in the back. My family is not pictured in this. This is just an illustration. The Korean chapter. This is one of the earliest photographs of the Hangsadang. my great-grandfather. On my grandfather's side, Grandpa Yin's father is in the middle. He was the first president, Sung Kwan Kim. And then if you look second from the right in the first level, you'll see Sarah Kim or Haiwan Kim, great-grandmother. And this is currently the house now in Catalina Street. Coming up to modern day. I'm going to show you this little clip. I was invited, one of my longtime clients is the anchor of the NBC News. His name's Robert Kovacic. And I've been training him in fitness for 2 decades, if you can imagine. When he was younger, before he got into television, he was a very good friend of my auntie, Wendy, who's Korean. You saw a photo of her in the family photo a few slides ago. In 2018, just before COVID, he invited me to do a short piece for Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I'm going to go ahead and play this now. If there's any sound issues, somebody jump in and let me know.
Colin, I don't think we can hear the video.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, one moment. Let's see here. Okay, share. I'm going to try this again, and will someone let me know?
NBC4 is celebrating Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and we begin tonight with a family whose blood...
Does that work?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
NBC4 is celebrating Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and we begin tonight with a family whose bloodline holds a powerful place in history, both in Los Angeles and in South Korea. Robert Kovacic has tonight's Live Connected with photojournalist Sean Browning and Elliot Mendoza.
It's an incredible sensation.
We start near USC on a walking tour through history.
This was their home when they moved here in 1930.
With the direct descendant of pioneers from Korea who arrived in Los Angeles a little more than a century ago.
We're living in a time on the planet where we don't have to look far to see the hardships of immigrants and refugees. And it's interesting that people will often villainize refugees as less than human, when to be a refugee and to seek a better life is the most honorable thing that a human being can do.
That was the goal of Colin Kim's great-grandparents.
There were only 150 Koreans in Los Angeles, and now Los Angeles houses the second biggest Korean population on the planet with over 250,000 residents.
At the invitation of the South Korean government, Colin, with his father Melvin and his brother Corey, traveled to Seoul to honor his great-grandfather Kim Sung-kwan and his great-grandmother Sarah Kim. Colin was about to connect with them in ways he never expected.
Growing up, we have had many photos of our grandparents, but never had put the dots together of exactly who they were. There was really powerful moments on that trip in coming to understand exactly who our great-grandparents were in the line of Korean democracy and independence.
Even when they were living in the United States in the early 1900s, Colin's great-grandparents continued to fight to end the occupation of their homeland by Japan. Sarah founded the Korean Women's Organization in California, raising money for the independence effort, while her husband was president of the Young Korean Academy, instilling values that still inspire Colin to this day.
The ethics and bylaws of the Young Korean Academy were to have self-discipline with your personality, to have self-discipline with who you associate with. And the third was to be honorable and trustworthy in everything you do. And that is the thing I believe that is the cornerstone of the Korean people. It's to seek truth and then to specifically act courageously on that truth.
The remains of his great-grandparents returned to Korea from a Glendale cemetery and a repatriation ceremony.
We knew of our family's history, but we didn't understand the hardships of what they had to overcome.
Their hardships and their achievements earned the Kims of LA an introduction to the president of South Korea. And though he never met his great-grandparents,
this is your great-great-grandson, Colin Kim.
They are close to his heart.
I'm so proud to be a Korean American and to represent my heritage.
Back here at home, the walking tour continues at Wilshire and Western, the Alfred Song Metro Station.
Alfred H. Song is my grandmother's cousin. He was the first Korean American to ever be accepted into the California State Bar, which he obviously passed. And he was also not only the first Korean, but the first Asian to ever serve in the California State Legislature.
Colin Kim,
I can be whatever I want to be.
the popular spin and yoga instructor,
So funny.
grateful for life in LA, grateful to the relatives who came with courage to call it home.
And that could only have happened through the selfless service of all the people that came before.
Robert Kovacic, NBC4 News.
Okay, this is the last slide. My grandparents, with all that history, they give birth to Melvin. My dad married.
Now turn right onto Glendale Galleria.
Hey, Colin. I'm so
Hi.
sorry to interrupt, but I don't think we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we never saw the video.
Oh, you never. Oh, why did,
Destination
nobody told me. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Okay. Can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. My apologies. We tried to do a tech before, and I'll put a link in the videos in the chat section as soon as I finish. I'm just going to take about 3 more minutes here. This is my mom and my dad. My mom and my dad used to like to go. My mom was 15 years old. My dad was 18 in this photograph. And they went to Tijuana. They used to like to go drink and smoke cigarettes in high school. And that's where they could get away with it. This is in about 1970. They gave birth to me in 1977. My mom ran away from home. She was the daughter of her. She's Dutch by ethnic nationality, but she grew up in Tennessee. And Tennessee was not a very pleasant place in the 1950s. So her Caucasian family came here to Los Angeles, and there was so much violence in the home. They moved into a house in the middle of Watts, right at the beginning of the Watts riots. And there was so much tension in the house. My mom ran away from home, and she was put in foster care with a relatively famous actress. And that house where that actress foster care home was close by where my dad grew up. And remember that the house and everything that they had was because of the criminal enterprise. And so the lifestyle that my Korean family was having put my dad nearby the foster care home of where my mom was. And my mom and dad, they quite literally ran away together. And they're both still alive. We love them very much. And that is where I think I'm gonna stop the share here. I'm gonna come back to you now. Okay. And I kind of just went through that. I was curious if I'd like to open for any questions. You can feel free to unmute. I'm a very easygoing person, so if anybody wants to take a chance and comments or questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
I have a question. Hi.
Ashley, yes.
Why do you think it's important that our generation of Korean Americans are able to know our stories?
I wish I could take you all on. That'd probably actually be a good idea if I could get at least a couple of you. Let me see the date. On August 17th, typically once a year, it cooled off during COVID and they're getting them going again, but they do an annual pioneer luncheon for descendants of the original pioneers. And I say this really politely because I have the same question that you have, Ashley, and I've been trying to involve myself in the Korean community. there were many people, my great-grandfather and great-grandparents and all of these legacies, they were not the only people that did this. There were hundreds of people that put their heart into this, and maybe even your own family members. And so everybody deserves credit. The unique feature is that Kim Sung-kwan and Haiwan were the leaders of the movement, but everybody was participating at a maximum level. So I want to give everybody credit, make sure that everybody's recognized. Because of all those voices and personal interpretations of how people helped Korea, there's a lot of inner turmoil about people trying to take power of the Korean. Like if you go to a Korean seminar currently to honor pioneers, it's typically people in their 80s and 90s and nobody speaks English. When I go to these conventions, there might be 200 people there and I sit for 2 hours and don't understand. I don't unfortunately speak Korean. So I don't want to say infighting, but people have wanted their face and their family to be the face of it, and people's toes get stepped on. That's been happening for 4 decades, for 40 years. And so I'm so glad that you asked that question because it didn't occur to me to share it. I think that that's more important than even the presentation I gave you. The entire point is for you to take your voice forward, and you don't have to memorize all of this stuff. Talk about the stuff that's exciting for you. Look for ways to get involved. Some people, people have different gifts in their leadership and their ability as people. Some people are really good at organizing people. Some people are really good at the administration, like calendar work and getting all the math done and making sure things are paid. Some people can close their eyes and visualize how a big reception is going to go, maybe like the artistic side or how we're going to make things pretty. And so it's a lot. If you try and create a PowerPoint presentation to very few people want to sit on a summer night. That's why I'm so impressed with you all, because it's the most beautiful time of day on one of the most beautiful days of the year. And you've logged on to look at history. And for me, that means the world to me, because I'm like you. I'm a person who has found the most dedicated interest at a young age. And why is it important? Well, we can already see, and without politicizing on tonight's program, we can already see how history is beginning to repeat itself as certain styles and cultures of people that don't. There's the haves and the have-nots, and the people who have are really starting to step on the toes of the people that have not. And in America, we've become sedated, a little anesthetized. We love our lifestyles. Our parents and our great-grandparents, specifically Koreans, fought so hard to give us the lifestyles that we enjoy now. But that lifestyle cannot be, it's like you need vegetables in your diet, and the lifestyle cannot just be candy, eating candy bars all the time. And I say candy bars figuratively, like too much social media or trying to brand everybody with your face or your images, or Temu and Amazon. And just, I'd like to say too, because I think that this is hysterical. I grew up in LA. I don't have a lot of connection to the Korean culture beyond my Korean grandparents. Nobody in my family spoke Korean, even though they're direct descendants. They immigrated very quickly and became Americans very quickly, and they stopped talking Korean. But Korean barbecue in Los Angeles, that's an American invention. I never knew that. I went to Seoul, I'm probably telling you things that you know, but let me share with you because it was astonishing to me. When we went on that heritage trip, I was so shocked how thin Koreans are, because my experience of Koreans in Los Angeles is everybody's stocky, kind of makes fun of like the moon cheeks and the big face. And it's because we're typically gluten and alcohol intolerant. We don't normally eat and drink all of that food. When you went to Korea, they give you thimbles of rice. And my dad's like, "Where's the rice?" Like, Dad, calm down. It's like if you go to Olive Garden and you just keep ordering breadsticks. And I thought it was so funny. And let me share this with you. A friend of mine who's Jewish, because Korean people split South Central Los Angeles with the Jewish people who were here first in that ghetto, or that section of Los Angeles. Now a lot of Jewish people of varying nations around the planet live in West Hollywood, as you may know. But Jewish people were in South Central Los Angeles by USC first. Koreans came in. And so the Korean barbecue short rib is what they call the Jewish cut from the butcher. Because when you went to Korea back in the day, people were very, very poor, but it's like if you go to India, people didn't know they were poor because there was no television or outside influences like in the 18 and 16 and 1400s. So people ate mostly uncooked vegetarian diet, which is all the banchan that we're used to. But even beyond that, even that has become a little bit commercialized and a bit commercialized in American. But all the colder foods is typically the predominance, 90% of what Korean people from Korea ate before the 1950s. And then when Korean people who did not have money that were work immigrants that came to Los Angeles had an opportunity to start their businesses, they took small pieces of meat, charged a lot of money for that, and then filled the restaurateurs with rice and food. So what we recognize as Korean barbecue is actually, let me put it this way, like orange chicken was invented by smart Chinese people who took the inedible parts of dark meat chicken, they put it in donut batter, and then they put orange glaze on it. So they wanted to sell off the fatty chicken. So orange chicken's not Chinese at all, and I know that you know that. But Korean food, as we experience it, I was shocked and amazed to learn, well, it's become a huge part of our identity. We can even, as we're working the barbecue, understand that that's not all of who we are. Anybody else have any questions? A couple more minutes with you. Don't feel shy, and I hope to meet you someday. I wish I could have come in person. Ashley, if you're speaking, it's unmuted. No. Let me say this too is, I'm obviously going from my personal opinion here. So I gave you history, but now I'm going into my own personal voice, and I think that's necessary to say. This is just the way I've experienced and what I feel. My whole youth, I grew up, we called it like the Kim curse, this kind of staunch attitude that can be deep in the emotional DNA of Koreans. You might not recognize this on your parents and your grandparents. There's even a term you can go, I'm sure that you've heard of this on Wikipedia, called Han, H-A-N. Han is buried grief and sorrow and resentment for having been colonized and massacred. Very much, many Holocausts have happened on the planet, not just the Jewish Holocaust. The Korea also had a Holocaust. Japan killed millions of people. And there was no way to process that grief. We were put on boats and then shipped around the world, and then had to integrate so quickly that grief. It's like the lightning of grief and sorrow never ran through the course of the body. And what our ancestors did so beautifully is they made a pact through Anchang Ho. And they said, we have no life. I want to make this point with you seriously. We're going to sacrifice our entire life so that our children can have a chance. And they did. So that the heaviness of what I thought was the Korean attitude, like the liquor store owner or the tight-lipped kind of irritable person, was actually a person that hasn't gone through healing. And so a huge part of my voice and what I'm trying to do in person and in real time, beyond my own family, is connect with the elders that are still alive now to help them know that their story is heard. I think that's one of the things that you could do, is attend Korean gatherings in Los Angeles and anywhere you can, and shake the hand of an elderly person. I call them our owls, our original owls. They're in their 90s now, and they're not going to live much longer. So if you have a chance to participate, I would say that you should. And I don't, as an adult, I don't slip into, let me just say this really simply. The things that I didn't like about myself as a young person, I used to call being Korean. And I realized that that was not a basket for me to put things that I didn't like about myself or my self-esteem, or people making Asian jokes of all different kinds. What matters to me is my truth and the legacy of what all of our great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents did to give us the ability to have this conversation tonight. And the fact that you're even interested, I just want to commend you on and just give you a big high five. Anybody else want to hop in? Does anybody relate to, like, does anybody have family members that are connected to the original democratic movement? No. Yeah. That's why these stories are important. How do you think, it's a big question and it will take longer than probably the time that we have, but how do you think, because if you went out and told your friends, hey, like, come to this Zoom meeting, a couple might come, but it's kind of hard to convince somebody to take a history lesson, right? And most people, even though it's interesting and fascinating and actually uplifting, how do you think people your age as adolescents and young adults would become interested in learning this information? Is it like going to schools, do you think? Is it creating like a TV show? Is it trying to get a documentary made that would show on Netflix? Is it me sitting here every Tuesday night for a year and just inviting people and keep telling the story over and over again? What do you think would be a successful way potentially of like communicating? You know, I was thinking too, because Koreans, when Japan, we had concentration camps in Utah, and while we didn't necessarily execute people through mass ethnic cleansing like the Jewish people, there were concentration camps, terrible, terrible places where awful things happened. And you didn't have a card that said Japanese or Chinese or Korean or Filipino. So anybody that looked Japanese got put into those camps. And, you know, if you go to the Museum of Tolerance here in Beverly Hills, the Jewish people have many walk through very ornate $1 million museums that show the expression of the Jewish plight for life and immigration and success in our world. And if you go to the little tiny Korean museums on Jefferson, there's the Korean National Association, and the little tiny museums that you can walk through. You've probably been. I think when I was there last time, I'd even seen a couple of you. But maybe one day we could have a space that's well appointed and tells our story. Because I feel like the things that tell our story now are getting a little bit old and dusty. So I'd like you to put on your thinking caps, and I don't know how to ask you to do this because you'll do it in your own unique way. And like I said earlier, everybody has their own unique gifts and expressions of how they can uplift life and humanity. So I'm sure I'd like to get you concentrating on what you can do through your voice and taking the history as you understand it and then bringing it forth.
So in my school, I'm the secretary of the Korean Culture Club. So right now we've been mostly focusing on like the fun stuff, like, you know, the arts and crafts and just talking about the language. But like I've been thinking about talking about history, especially since our sponsor is a history teacher. And we do have a few non-Korean friends, so I think that's a great way to start on a personal level.
How would you, what history would you share?
I think I'll mostly go about based on the dates. Like for example, like Samiljeol, that's what something we did. We made posters and put it up on the hallway. I was also thinking of like going over some aspects like Joseon Dynasty, Goryeo Dynasty, like just like the basics. Because in textbooks I just noticed there's barely a page about Korea history.
Mm-hmm.
And like the hurtful part, like the colonization is also important. But I think it's also important to show like the bright side, like the culture and how vibrant Korea was and how it is. So I think I'll be like most of that.
Lauren, I'm glad that you brought that up because I like to have documented facts to share with you. And so it's very important to me that this is not, I don't have a documented fact to show you. This is something I learned recently through the Pioneer Foundation, through speaking to elders. But the United States, can you get a thumbs up? How many people know why there's North and South Korea? Thumbs up or down. You do? So you know that just a couple nods. Did you know that it's because the coldest winter on record happened? Did you know that or no? Is it okay if I share that with you really quick? Yeah, I have a little bit of time and I'd like to share it with you. So Japan colonized, it's so nice because now that I'm not sharing screen, I can see you. Japan colonized Korea for over 400 years, killing people. Korean people were not like Chinese people. Chinese people were very administrative. Japanese people were very technologic and had the samurais and weapons of warfare. Korean people currently were almost like Balinese or Indonesian culture. We were very soft. We didn't have a modern religion or Christianity as we knew it. We were very soft people. We worked in the fields with the animals, and it's like Mongolia or Tibet. We were very gentle people. Japan colonized Korea for a very, very long time. And at a certain point, Japan started killing people from the top to the bottom of the peninsula. China came behind, and what they wanted to do was, after Japan had destroyed everything down to the ground, they wanted to be the people that put in all the piping and build the houses and create all the debt. They wanted to become the infrastructure. So America had just ended World War II, and America was not interested, nor were the citizens of America interested in getting involved in another war. This is all in the late 40s. So China is coming behind Japan. They're all shaking hands, trying to make commerce to after all these people are dying. And then Russia got involved, and Russia said, no, China, we're going to take over. And Russia's trying to push China out because Russia wants to take over Korea. But Russia waited to the last minute after most of everybody had been killed. So when Russia got involved, because Russia had a beef through World War II, United States said, hey, that's it. We're jumping in. So America got involved. It didn't happen as quickly or as easily as I'm telling you. You can imagine all the factors. They pamphleted all of the peninsula of Korea and said, we're going to start carpet bombing. So everybody had been killed from the top to the bottom, Japan, China, Russia. And then America said, we're going to start at the bottom where people are still living, and we're going to start bombing north. So all those people are going to get squished like an Oreo cookie. And so they pamphleted and said, so you don't get squished like an Oreo cookie and die, make your way with all of your babies and everything to the edge of the peninsula. And there's 59 steamer boats. It was like 2 days later. This didn't happen like a month with announcement. It's like 2 days. They start bombing from the bottom. And then they got to the certain line and they start pushing up like that. 5,000 people got on those boats. If you could survive the bombing, which some people did. My great aunt, Jason Lee's sister, she was one of the first people to go back from America to Korea. Nobody was coming. There was no Christian missionaries. There was no Red Cross. The war was over, and people. My great auntie opened an orphanage that helped Korean preschoolers go all the way through college. She was one of the first people to go and do that. And she said that when she went there were naked babies sitting in the street like this. That's the way it was. So America's bombing from the bottom on this campaign. And the line of the DMZ, the North and the South, is because the coldest winter on record happened. If I remember correctly, it was negative 40 degrees. It's still to this day, it's the coldest thing that ever happened in the Indochina area. It was so cold that China, Russia, Japan, imagine how cold it would have to be for the ego of war to quit. All 4 countries quit. They said, we're done. When you go to museums in Korea, there's cardboard, not North Face or Columbia or Lululemon. There's cardboard outfits. China sent 1 million people arm in arm to walk from China in the snow to push down Koreans out. So buried like 3 levels down in dirt, there are millions of Chinese people buried in cardboard. They're still unearthing them like Jurassic Park still today. And when you go to the museum, you can see hundreds of pieces of cardboard. The coldest winter happened. All 4 countries said, we can't tolerate millions and millions more citizens dying. Russia lost 20, Russia lost 22 million people in World War II. 22 million people of their own people were slaughtered. Because Russia was upset with America, they left all the Russian propaganda of communism above that frozen line. And people who had been bombed and dejected and had nothing and were poor once time had passed, they became interested and wanted to be entertained. There's no television, there's no internet, there's no electricity. And the only thing to read was Russian propaganda magazines. So they did that. They read, and that's why North Korea looks like 1950s Russia. So pardon my French, but to like piss off the United States, Russia knew that the United States nor any other country everybody was so exhausted from 30 years of war that when the Korean War ended, Russia knew that nobody was coming to save Koreans. So they're like, and they dropped all their propaganda all over the Korean, what we know as North Korea. And you probably know this, but when you go to South Korea, South Korean people are not like, anti-North Korea. They're like, that's my second cousin on the other side. And what South Koreans typically want is reunification. We want healing with our family. So when people say, are you North or you're South? If you can take people a step deeper into the identity of who you truly are, because if we went back far enough in your charts, if we were on History Channel and we could go into your family tree, we would see that you have family members like this. And so the Korean War was not because Koreans were bad people. Korean people weren't even in the military. It was because people were fighting for our land. And what ultimately happened, and if you've been to Seoul, you will know that Seoul, South Korea looks like New York because America did all the infrastructure. America wanted that infrastructure. America also wanted to put nuclear bombs so that we can be safe from other Asian countries like Japan and Russia in that particular area of the world. We specifically have bombs in Israel and in South Korea. And it's only for that reason that America was interested in South Korea, not for Koreans, but because we wanted to put rockets in the ground to protect ourselves from that region. That doesn't make, the ethics of war are terrible and human beings are lost. But it's the reality of what has happened. And that's that.
Okay, I think if we don't have any more questions, we can end it here for today. Let's give Colin one round of applause. Thank you, Colin, for joining and sharing your story with us today. And if you guys don't have any other questions, you guys are free to go. Thank you for joining.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Good day.
Bye.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, actually, I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Okay, bye.